and author of his latest book, Brighter Days, is Patrick Regan, OBE. And I'm thrilled to say that he joins us on the line. Patrick, hello.
Morning.
Good morning. How you doing? Are you well?
Yeah, I'm doing well, thank you.
Your story is fascinating. I've got so much to ask you, and I suppose it's not for me to kind of sum you up. That's why you're here to tell us about the book and your journey. But how did it start? And I've got to say that you are very modest. You're humble, in my opinion, too humble.
Oh, thank you. I don't know what that means, but yeah. I mean, I guess I was running quite a reasonable sized charity, and I went through one of those times in my life which I can only describe as the Tetris moment. Do you remember the game Tetris?
I remember I tried to clock it so many times, and clocking the game means trying to get to the end. And I would get to a certain level, Patrick, where you get more bricks being thrown at you, and then suddenly, and you've just reminded me of the music.
It's so addictive.
I love it. Was addictive. It was such an addictive game.
Yeah, but you know what? I feel like sometimes life can feel a bit like Tetris. You've got all these things coming at you, and you're trying to get them all in a straight line. You're just trying to work it all out, and eventually they just come at you so quickly. You just think, I just can't do this anymore. And I think I went through one of those stages where Dad got cancer. And he's meant to be in hospital for a week. He was 9 weeks, 4 different operations. My kids got really sick. And, it's awful when your kids get sick because you feel powerless to be able to do anything for them. And that's a horrible place to be.
I'm sorry to hear that.
And then I got diagnosed with a degenerative knee condition, which means I needed to get both my legs broken in 3 places and a big external frame attached to my bones. It'll be on for 6 months to 18 months. And both operations had to be done at different times. So it's sort of like a 3 or 4 year recovery period. And I went from being this activist, to suddenly feeling very unwell. And when you feel unwell, your world contracts, it gets very small. And I just my mental health just started spiraling out of control. And I think, if I'm honest, I've always struggled with mental health, but I feel like what happens is when we go through a traumatic experience, it acts like rocket fuel to your mental health, a bit like COVID did for so many people, where it's like suddenly it just escalates and then you struggle to get control of it.
When did you realise that things were spiralling or getting out of control?
I think it's when your thoughts turn incredibly dark, and you start feeling incredibly negative about life, and you start trying to work out, is there a way out of this? And the only way I could describe it was, is you feel like you're falling, but you can't stop yourself. It's a bit like when you're on a roller coaster, that you're going down, and there's nothing you can do to get yourself back up, and you're wondering, oh my goodness, how far is this dip going to be? And when you're in it, it feels like it lasts forever. But of course, the thing is things can change, and the reason I wrote Brighter Days was not because I didn't want to acknowledge that there's dark days. Of course, there's lots of dark days for people. But the fact is that poor mental health isn't a life sentence. There are things that we can do to support ourselves, things that we can learn, and how we can get help from other people as well.
It's funny that you mention other people, because I mentioned a story earlier on where I had a bit of a challenging time. I was knocking on doors. I was trying to, I suppose it was a career-related issue, and it got to the point where you mentioned the analogy or the connection with Tetris, and I suppose I had a somewhat, I would call it a minimal Tetris moment, and I called 2 good friends of mine. We went out for dinner, and I explained the issue, and what they said to me, I suppose it made me very conscious of who to speak to, because they more or less said, Patrick, they said, look, you'll be fine in the morning, have a cold shower, and everything will be okay.
Yeah.
And you're saying there about reaching out to people. Reaching out to people is a good thing, but do you think you have to be more or less minded on who you speak to Were you minded about who you reached out to?
100%. Yeah, 100%. You're 100% right, because I feel like one of the things I actually look at in the book is trying to find a safe person. And I sort of define what a safe person is. You know, it's someone that's not going to try and come along and fix you. Because I think that when you're struggling, actually what you need is just someone to be alongside, you know, not to judge you, not to say, cheer up, it'll be all right in the morning. You know, there are complex reasons why people get in the situations they're at. You know, there's lots of backstory that needs to be. But I think it's just safe people that you could be honest with, who are going to love you without any agenda. And I think that's, you know, it's so important, because even when I had my leg done, you know, I used to go to church, and well, I still go to church occasionally, but people were like, oh, come on, you just need to pray harder. And I'm like, hang on a minute, I'm praying as hard as I can. Or, you know, maybe you've done something wrong and you need to, you know, say sorry to God for it and stuff like that. And you know, I had a strong faith, which is important to get you through these things. But sometimes, you know, what people say, people can be really unthoughtful, and they just want to make it better for you, or they want to try and find a reason. And sometimes, you know, there are reasons, and other times life just hits you hard, and you've got to find the best way out of it. But I think any mental health issue escalates if you don't talk to anyone about it, and if you're completely alone with it. So it's important to find some safe people who you know have got your back.
You mentioned faith there, and I want to go back to about people who've got your back. But you mentioned faith there. Have you ever questioned your faith?
Yeah, I think so. I think I didn't question, like, does God exist? I think it was almost like, I don't think God likes me very much. I think I'm on the naughty list, because life just got tough, you know, and everything I was trying seemed to backfire on me. And so, you know, I guess, you know, long story short, I remember I got to the lowest place where my wife was actually pregnant with her fourth child, and it was her fourth kid, and she had a cesarean section, and she lost 2.8 litres of blood in the operation. And so she was in the high dependency unit, and I was just like, oh my goodness, like, this is the last straw. You know, I can't lose her. This is just it. And I remember I was in King's College Hospital in South London, and it was about 5 o'clock in the morning. And opposite Salvation Army quarters opposite the King's College Hospital is the International Centre for the Salvation Army. And I remember going there and looking out the window, and it was really, really dark. And of course, they have this massive cross that just lights up the sky. You know, it's really beautiful. And I just felt at that time, I just felt a sense of, you know, God's silence doesn't mean God's absence. And I felt like it, you know, it was less why me, and actually experiencing faith within the pain, within the anxiety, and then realizing that actually for a lot of the Bible characters, they experienced doubt, they experienced depression, they experienced some of the things that I was going through. And faith became more of a choice. And in recent years, I got to know Terry Waite. I don't know if you remember Terry Waite.
I don't know him personally, but I'm aware, I've come across, of course, Terry Waite, yes, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, and I was talking to him about it, and I was struggling, and, you know, he was basically captive for 5 years, and I was like, mate, and for 4 years of those, he was hostage, and, you know, he had a bag over his head, he couldn't see anything, he was locked down on a different level. And he said, you know, faith isn't always about an emotion, it's often about a choice. And then I think that I've come to that conclusion as well.
It's very powerful. And how would you say your faith is nowadays? Would you still go to, you mentioned you still go to church? Do you still have a connection?
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, I do. And I'm often out speaking and doing lots of public speaking, and so I'm not always at my church every single week. So I've got kids who play football as well. So you've got to support your kids.
You got to do it.
You got to do it. And So I think faith is important. And I think that, again, when I was writing Brighter Days, I noticed with a lot of, I guess, self-help books or whatever you call them, is they just leave out spiritual health completely, because I think it's one of those topics where it sort of divides opinion. And I'm like, hang on a minute, this for millions, if not billions around the world is a source of comfort, that sense of prayer, that sense of connection, that sense of being part of something bigger. It gives a lot of purpose, gives a lot of meaning. And though I've struggled with it, like I struggle with my physical and my mental and emotional health, and people can struggle with spiritual health, is a part of health. And that's why I think it's important to look at and to realize that, it is a beautiful feeling to know that whatever situation you're in, that you're never on your own. And I think that's what faith does for you. It says that whatever you go through, someone goes through it with you.
I want to go back to, you're talking about the backstory, or as in, not so backstory, about people who you can confide in and reach out to. Who is that person for you, Patrick, that you're able to trust and open up to?
Yeah, so it was definitely my wife and my family, and though she struggles, and I think sometimes when people go through tough times, all the attention's on the person that's going through the tough time. You probably remember there was a guy called Roy Castle. He performed in pubs and clubs across the country.
Yeah.
And he actually died of secondhand smoke. He never smoked a cigarette in his life, but actually he was just around so many people that did. And I think sometimes, people listening to this, sometimes it's the carers, it's the people who are caring, who need our love and support and help as well. And but there was a point where I was like, I need to get some professional help, and I found a really good therapist and someone who I could sort of chat to, be open with, and who could really help me, actually just give me some really practical tools to realize that a lot of stuff that happens to us, we're just not in control of. And I think that we think that we're in more control of life than we actually are. and a lot of life comes from worrying about what other people's opinion of us is as well. And so I did find some practical tools, and I found someone who I could open up to, which was really helpful.
Has that helped?
Yeah, no, totally. And, years on, I still keep in contact with them. And because, again, I think it's a process, isn't it? It's something that we have to go through. And I think sometimes it's looking at the stress around us as well. I've often said that stress is when the demands on us outweigh our resources to cope. And so constantly having that mindset of looking out and making sure that we've got enough things in our life that are helping us be more resilient, helping us to be more kind, helping us to get the right support structure around us is really, really important. And, sometimes the bravest thing that we can do is ask for help, and to accept the situation we're in. Another thing I say, which I think is really important in the book, is that sometimes the more you try, when you get negative thoughts, the more you try not to think about something, what happens? I could stop trying to think about chocolate, but I just keep thinking about it the more I try and stop.
We all tend to do that, and that causes problems.
Exactly. But sometimes, it's the same. It's a bit like with negative thoughts, it's a bit like if you get a beach ball and you're trying to push it under the water, and the more you try and push it down, the more it pops up. And sometimes you just need to let it lay there on the surface and let it drift off. And I think sometimes that's what happens, and you need to be able to just question that thought and just let it go. And that can take a lot of practice. And sometimes it can just take someone else to help you as well.
It's all about help. Do you think we've got there as a society, or is it not so much a societal thing to reach out and ask for help?
I don't think we've got there as a society. I think we can be quite individualistic at times, and I think that it's staggering when you look at the loneliness statistics, that come out of this country. And when you consider that we're probably the most connected generation on the planet now, and yet people struggle more with loneliness and feeling isolated and feeling judged as well. We're very judgmental. I think, again, in brighter days, I say, I think loneliness has been in a crowd sometimes and feeling scared of giving your opinion because everyone's going to judge you. And
it's interesting you mentioned about loneliness. I was looking after the nightclub program on 5 Live, and Shirley, an 80-year-old lovely lady, called me up. And she called me up and she said, "I'm calling you up because I've got no one to talk to, and I just want someone to call me and just to say hello." And on the back of her call, it was just, it was touching just to know that we are still a loving nation and I suppose a caring society. And Emily from Cheshire offered to call Shirley and to speak to her a couple of times a week, and they swapped numbers, not on air, but we passed the numbers on to them. But just made me think, Patrick, that deep down we are caring, and we still do have those traditions of morality and able to communicate with people and do it in the right context.
Yeah, 100%. We were in between house moves a couple of months ago, and so we had to stay in the Premier Inn for quite a while. And I met this guy there, and I was like, he was in the bar sitting down. It was about 11 o'clock at night. And I was like, what are you doing here? And he goes, "I'm on holiday here." And I was like, "Where do you live?" And he was like, "I live just down the road." And as I started talking to him, I realised that he lives on his own and he comes here because he likes the company. And actually, he came because the way the staff treat him is really, really nice. He knew all the staff and all the different things that was going on. And I've travelled to some of the, toughest places on earth. And I think you're right. Wherever I go, it doesn't matter how difficult circumstances are, people at their heart are actually quite kind. They're quite generous. There's amazing acts of love and compassion and that go on, stands for justice. People will go the extra mile for other people, and sometimes for complete strangers. And there's something about the human spirit that is incredible, And there's one thing I often say is, a Chinese proverb, it's better to light a candle than curse the darkness. And sometimes it's just knowing how we can channel that and making sure that we can really be a community that looks out for each other's and not just for ourselves.
I love that proverb. I'm certainly going to be carrying that with me. When is the book due? Is the book out now? It's due to be published in a couple of weeks. It's available now. It's available now.
Yeah, and it's available all online and stuff. And I'm just hoping that I had someone come up to me with one of my previous books and said, "I don't think I'd be alive today if it wasn't for one of your books." And I was incredibly humbled, and I sort of think, like, what good can a book do? But I realised that sometimes, just small choices, small changes can make a massive difference, can't they? And sometimes, it's a bit like a ship. If it's off by a couple of degrees, it goes to a completely different place. So I'm really hoping that people get it, for people that may be struggling. And I wrote it in a really different way. I didn't write it as a chapter book because I knew when I was struggling, people kept on giving me books to read, and I was like, "There's no chance I'm reading this."
Yeah.
So I wrote it short stories and poems and little illustrations and things I found helpful.
And probably the best way to do it, the way you want people to interpret you, your style. I think sometimes we're kind of fixed in kind of doing it in the way in the normal way. And the thing is, what is the normal way? It's about you sharing your feelings and your thoughts and doing it the way you want people to understand you.
Yeah, and the other thing I did on it, which I've never done before, for each chapter, I wrote a question on social media. So I wrote a question was, what does anxiety feel like? And then within probably about half an hour, I'd have 100 comments. And it was just fascinating, from resilience. I said, what is resilience not? Because I think resilience as a word is really misunderstood. And so to just try and get that sort of grassroots, everyday language, if it's not practical and it doesn't help, then let's not do it. So I wanted to make it really sort of down to earth.
It's brilliant. I totally adore what you've done, and thank you for taking time out to talk to us this morning. And I'm going to get a copy. I have to get a copy of the book, and just to find out. And I think what you've done here, Patrick, is I think you've opened that door, and you've enabled. Well, you certainly enabled us to have the conversation, but I think you've enabled other people to have the conversation, and a conversation which many people necessarily wouldn't have.
Yeah, I hope so. And, and I'm really conscious as well, one size doesn't fit all. So everyone has a different experience and everyone has their own story. And just like we would go to the gym to look after our physical health or look at our diet, then actually if we could get a generation that's looking after their mental and emotional health, then I think we're going to be a lot better for it. And the world's going to be a lot better for it, because I think if there's anything the world needs at the moment, it's like you alluded to earlier, it's a sense of kindness and compassion for your fellow human being.
It certainly doesn't cost anything. And if we could all be kinder, the world would be a better place.
Yeah, 100%.
Patrick, you've set us in the right direction, my friend. Thank you so much. I appreciate the time. And Brighter Days is published by SBC Cakes.